Polychronopolous. 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 Polychronopolous.
Hand of the day.
Hey guys, it's Alec, Torelli, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Hand of the Day. I'm bringing you this one here from Macau, where I'm out here playing and coaching some high-stakes poker. But all the talk is going on at the PCA High Roller, the 25K, where Nguyen and Polychronopolous, I practiced that, played an epic hand. And I'd like to share my thoughts on this hand and attack it from two different places. From a game theory perspective and an exploitative perspective, because those are the different approaches that are happening in the discussion in the community today. And I'd like to share my thoughts on how I would navigate this spot versus different types of opponents and how I think the most practical way to play this hand would be. So let's talk about it in this very special episode of the Hand of the Day. This hand kicks off with Nguyen opening the button to 12,000 and Polychronopolous in the big blind makes it 37,000 with aces. Very standard 3-bet. I like going a little bit bigger here. They're deeper. And you're going to want to apply pressure here with aces. Very standard spot. Over to Nguyen, who I think has a very clear call. They're outside the money, so you are going to want to play a little bit more conservative in this spot because of ICM considerations. Basically the idea that your chips are worth more as you progress in the tournament, and you're not going to want to take a high variance line and 4-bet here and then not know what to do if Polychronopolous jams. So I would definitely be flat calling here and playing the pot in position, which she does. So let's go heads up to the flop. The flop comes down King Queen 9 with 2 spades and Polychronopolous opts to check. I think I understand what he's trying to do here. It's a very textured board. It's kind of a dangerous board. He's not loving it with aces. Maybe he doesn't feel like he can get 3 streets of value. Maybe he doesn't feel like there's a lot of great runouts for his hand. He doesn't really want to bust out of position in this spot, so maybe he just wants to check and play pot control, planning on check calling down. One thing you got to consider here in spots like these is what is like the best way to play the hand? Or in other words, sometimes you want to ask what is the least bad way to play the hand? If Polychronopolous is beat here, he's going to check call 3 times and lose. And sure, he wins money from bluffs against Nguyen, but he also misses the opportunity to get value from hands or protection against hands that Nguyen is going to check if Polychronopolous checks. A hand, for example, like ace-queen or maybe even a king-x hand. All this is to say there's definitely a case for betting here, and if you do bet this flop, you're probably going to want to do what's called a down bet, meaning you're betting smaller on the flop than is relative to the pot. So something like 1/3 of the pot would be a great bet size here post-flop from Polychronopolous. As played, he checks. Now it's over to Nguyen, who has a very clear check in my opinion. She can't get 3 streets of value. There aren't many cards that hurt her. And she's going to want to play pot control with this hand, looking to either call a bet on the turn or bet the turn herself if Polychronopolous checks a second time. She checks and we go heads up to the turn. The turn comes an offsuit queen and Polychronopolous checks again. Now I actually like his turn check a little bit more than his flop check because the queen is not a great card for his hand. Nguyen checked in position. Some of the times when she checks, she's going to be having a queen in her range. And so it's a good spot to check and play pot control, and it's also going to be kind of difficult for him to get 2 streets of value. He's probably not going to get 2 streets of value from a 9. Sure, he can get 2 streets of value from a king, but Nguyen bets a lot of her kings on the flop, so maybe he's thinking that he really can't get 2 streets of value here. Also with aces specifically, he doesn't want to bet and then get raised and be in a really tough spot, so I kind of can get behind the check here in this spot, and if she does check behind on the turn, I would be looking to go like 50,000 on the river, making a 2/3 pot bet and winning a big, decent-sized hand with aces. I think that's a fine way to proceed. He checks, and now it's over to Nguyen, who has an absolute slam dunk, super clear bet. The only question is, how much? The pot's like 77,000 or so. I think she should go here half pot or maybe even a little bit bigger, something along those lines. Maybe 1/3 of the pot would be fine too. She opts to bet 17,000, which I think is just too small here. I'd like to go a little bit bigger and set this up for a bigger size river bet to really put Polychronopolous in a very tough spot with his entire range. I think she could also exploitatively bet a little bit bigger here and just get value because Polychronopolous, if he has a hand that he's planning on calling the turn and the river with, he's going to call pretty much regardless of what size she bets. So from an exploitative standpoint, I think she could go a little bit bigger here, like 40,000 on the turn, 100,000 on the river, and just try and rep a queen, but get called by all the hands that he has that are bluff catchers. As played, she bets 17,000 and over to Polychronopolous, who has a very clear call. Definitely doesn't want to raise here. He's behind any queen X hand. He's picking off bluffs, picking off value from a king. Very clear standard check call. We go heads up to the river, where things get interesting. The river comes an ace of spades. Polychronopolous checks, which I think is a great play. He should be looking to check raise here. I think checking with his entire range makes a lot of sense. Great play by him. Over to Nguyen, who has an obvious clear bet. The only question, again, is how much. She could approach this in one of two ways. One is she can try and put a king in a tough spot, and you have to ask yourself, what bet size makes it really difficult for a king? The answer is probably something like a quarter to a third of the pot. So if she wants to play a balanced approach and try to make it difficult for her opponent's range, which is most likely a king X type of hand, maybe an ace X type hand, she can bet a third to a fourth of the pot. If she wants to go exploitative and just try and win the max from a stubborn hand or get value from a queen, she could just go bigger and bet something like 70,000. As played, she opts to do a 50,000 bet, which is a little less than half the pot. Now it's over the Polychronopolous, who has an obvious jam, which he opts to do. And it's back on Nguyen, where this is where the talk of the poker community is happening. What should she do here? Now, there are different ways to approach this spot. And it seems like in poker today, there are two schools of thought. There's like, it's tantamount, almost in my opinion, to like Democrats and Republicans, where like they can never seem to agree. People can never seem to find a happy medium between whether you should approach these situations from a game theory perspective, and you should just always call here because this is one of the best hands you can have. You're calling with the top of your range. You're going to make your opponent show you a bigger boat. If he has that, it's a cooler. That's just the way to play this hand. It's a very standard call from a theory fundamental perspective. And then there's the exploitative approach, who says like, you should try to sort of feel out what your opponent's range is. If he's playing tighter, then you should play tighter. If he's never bluffing here, maybe you can make a hero fold. And like, a lot of people are coming to me asking, which approach should you take? And what's the best way to navigate these spots? I'd like to kind of take a step back and tell you how I kind of approach these situations. And then I'm going to give you my feedback on the hand specifically. So, there are different types of situations that you play in poker, and there are different formats of poker that call for different strategies. Kind of tantamount to tennis, where you're playing on clay court versus grass court versus hard court. You're still playing tennis, but it's a very different game. Sometimes serve and volley works, and sometimes long, deep rallies work. And I feel like in poker, it's kind of like that. If you come from, the high stakes online community, or if you're playing elite high roller live tournaments, game theory is very important. And if you find yourself in a spot like this with ace queen against great players that might be turning, ace jack into a bluff, and they're going to have balanced ranges, you have to call here. This is a standard slam dunk, trivial, obvious call against certain types of players in certain environments. So it really depends a little bit on your opponent and the format of poker you're playing. Now, if you're playing live poker against a very specific type of opponent, which maybe some of you can imagine, a guy that has zero bluffing range, that's never ever bluffing, and that in a high stakes tournament, maybe he's like never played a tournament in his life, a big tournament in his life, and he qualifies. I'm not saying this is Polychronopolous, but qualifies for a high stakes tournament, and like he's not even going to shove nines here on the river, or not even going to shove king queen because he can't even have king queen. Then maybe you can consider making an exploitative fold like this one with ace queen. So I'm a little bit more open to different schools of thought, and I use different approaches in different scenarios. I don't think there's necessarily one right answer, and I also believe that in spots like these, it's very easy to sit here on the rail, look at the results, and then give your opinion. The truth is, we don't have the most important piece of information, which is just the essence of the live game and the history of the opponents and the understanding of that person, Polychronopolous, and who he is and what his range is likely to be and which type of profile of a player he falls under. But in general here, you're not going to make a mistake by calling. It's definitely the correct play just to opt to call here if you don't know what to do, and avoid trying to make insanely big folds in spots where calling is just the default right play. There is a percentage of the population that you could profitably fold this hand to, I believe, but the percentage is going to be very small, and the situations are going to be very rare and unique, maybe something like 5% of the time, 10% of the time. Was this one of those 5%? I don't really know, but we have to give Nguyen credit for being right. There is something to be said about times when you deviate from what game theory says and you make the right decision. Maybe that's just your intuition or your subconscious telling you that you can make a play that your conscious mind can't really quantify. It's kind of tantamount to meeting someone for the first time and saying, you know what? I don't really like this person. It's not the color of their shirt or the shoes they're wearing that give you this information. It's not your conscious mind that's making these decisions. It's your subconscious just quantifying all the elements of the situation and all the years of evolution to figure out what's the best way to approach the situation, whether or not you can trust this person. And I believe that our intuition has the power to make excellent decisions, and I've banked on that at the poker table in my career, and it's served me well. So I gotta give Nguyen credit for folding here and making the right play. There is definitely something to be said about that, and that is an incredible fold. On paper, I probably couldn't make this fold. I'm just gonna call it off. But I'd like to show you a little bit about the math behind the situation and why I'm saying what I'm saying. It's not just based on like this grand idea of like, oh, you should just trust your intuition, or it's not based on the results. It's actually based on the idea that your equity in the hand, the percentage of the time that you're going to win the hand, is based on what you think your opponent's range is. And their range is contingent on who they are as a person. So if they're a person that is a GTO player, they're going to have a range like this one that you see right here. It's going to be a mix between some bluffs, some worse value, and some better hands. And against this range, you have plenty of equity. You can see here Ace Queen has this amount of equity, and you're going to have enough equity to justify calling here. But if you're playing against a player that is a very particular type of player, and you could systematically eliminate hands from their range based on who they are and how they play hands. For example, maybe you say he can't have nines here because he would have bet the flop with nines, or he would have bet the turns. He can't have king queen for the exact same reason. He also can't have ace jack as a bluff because he's not capable of bluffing, and he can't have a flush because he would only check call the river with a flush. Therefore, his river check raising range is something like aces and kings, and that's it. Therefore, you can see your equity right here is a grand zero. In that spot, maybe you could make a hero fold and opt to fold the ace queen because you know that you're up against a very specific type of opponent that's never going to exploit you, and you're going to make a high level fold that you otherwise can't make. That's kind of how I approach this situation. It's not like Democrat, Republican, game theory, or exploitative. It's using the best practices of game theory and then also being open to the idea that you have to adjust your play to the situation. It's not like there's one size fits all. The best players are capable of using game theory and intuition to make high-level decisions, and they know when they have to stick to their ranges, they have to stick to game theory, they have to play a solid approach, and they know when they can maybe deviate from that to increase their win rate above what is possible just by using a game theory approach. I would love to hear your thoughts. I learned so much from your feedback and your comments, and I do read all my comments, and I really would appreciate your guys' thoughts on this hand. Let me know your opinion. Should she call here and just stack off all the time and play a game theory approach? Or should she go exploitative and maybe make a superhero fold in a spot where she can save her whole tournament life if she's wrong? Leave your thoughts in a comment below. The best comment I will pin to the top, and they will win a free month of our Conscious Poker Pro membership program, which I'm really excited about to give you guys an opportunity for. Thank you so much. Subscribe to my channel because if you want more updates about life here in Macau, the high stakes poker scene, and what's going on out here, I'm putting out a series of vlogs in the coming weeks about everything and anything Macau related, as well as my journey here playing some high stakes poker that I'd love to share with you guys, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time on the Hand of the Day. Thanks for watching.